We have some pretty substantial NHL rumors to discuss today, and could we see a mass exodus out of Arizona, leading players to teams like the Flames, the Oilers, and the Avalanche? And could we see something different out of Montreal? Could we actually see a scenario where Phil Danault is traded and Max Domi ends up staying after all? We'll jump into all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as you can see, we're doing another indoor video here today. Hopefully over the weekend here, we'll get back to some outdoor videos, but with schedules and everything, it's just kind of been a lot easier and more simpler for me to do these here with the jersey set up in behind me. So I hope you're okay with that and enjoying the scenery here as we discuss all the latest NHL news. Now, before we jump into the trade rumors I want to discuss today, we do have a couple other news items to quickly touch on, including the Selke Trophy, which was announced last evening with Philadelphia Flyers forward Sean Couturier being the winner of the Selke Trophy for 2020, which is certainly more than well deserved. Obviously, he's been one of the better two-way forwards in the NHL for some time, so it was nice to see that the voters appreciated him and gave him the love he deserves. So it's a big win. Patrice Bergeron and Ryan O'Reilly were second and third respectively, but Couturier did win by a pretty substantial margin. Looking at some of the other votes around the NHL, we're going to see the full list of all the players that received votes. There's certainly some really surprising players out there that were given Selke consideration. I'd really like to see the voting process maybe adjusted, because some of these people who have voting privileges clearly seem to have absolutely no idea what they're doing. I mean, there was some balance that were the top three finalists were nowhere near their top five, which is just mind-blowing when you think about it. But interesting to see how the other awards work out here in the coming days ahead as they are announced gradually. Now, the other news here is the St. Louis Blues have signed forward Jacob Delarose to a one-year contract extension. A league minimum salary is just over $700,000. So obviously he remains with the Blues organization. He was acquired last year. A little bit surprised in a way, considering they need to kind of cut some costs to kind of sign their captain, Alex Pietrangelo. I know this is a small minor deal, but it's just, another player that's, in my opinion, kind of somebody they don't really need per se. But obviously for Delarose's case, I'm sure he's happy to continue on his career and remain with the Blues organization. Now, jumping over to the NHL trade rumors for today, we have some very interesting ones. A lot of this comes from Elliot Friedman in a recent radio hit, talking again about the possibility that the Arizona Coyotes really could blow things up, and we could see some of these top guys move on to some teams, and some of the Canadian teams are in big time in play here to acquire their services. Now, I've seen reports that the Coyotes may be looking to slash upwards of about $10 million or more in payroll, which obviously means a couple of substantial players going out, like Darcy Kemper and Oliver Ekman Larsson. Now, obviously, that part of that is not only to reduce salary, to recoup a lot of the draft picks that they're losing through the penalty they receive from the NHL due to that, testing players at junior levels, controversy that kind of stirred things up there not too long ago. To jump into the latest talks here, let's start with Darcy Kemper, and his more links that the Edmonton Oilers are also checking into his services. So it goes to show me here that Ken Holland is obviously aware and is looking to do something about the fact that the Oilers need a goaltending upgrade. It doesn't look like Mike Smith will be returning. Now, I know they have Mikko Koskinen. To me, I'm not confident enough in him to be a 1A starting goaltender without having a good 1B to back him up. And Smith was certainly inconsistent in that role. We've had rumblings before that we just talked about yesterday. They were having pretty deep trade discussions with the Penguins about Matt Murray, but they didn't want to pay the price tag that the Penguins were offering and are requesting, I should say. And obviously, we kind of wondered if they could circle back and have those discussions a little further. But they've also checked in on Freddie Anderson in Toronto, and now we're hearing that they're checking in on Darcy Kemper in Arizona, which really should be no surprise. As soon as we get word that the Coyotes were likely going down this road, Kemper and Ekman Larsson were the two players that I did a video and talked about, saying that Kemper is probably going to be a really hot commodity because he's got a really good contract based on how well he's played over the past year or two being in Arizona. He's been a terrific spot for them. Rant has been hurt a lot. He's really carried the ball, and it was a big reason why they had any opportunity to get into the play-in series and have any success at all during the return to play this year. Obviously, that team has struggled to score. They've had to rely on, strong team defensive play and great goaltending to really have any chance on most nights, and Kemper is a big reason for that. So obviously, I'm not sure what the asking price would be for Darcy Kemper, but it should not be a huge surprise, seeing as the other Oilers rumors that we've heard here that they're inquiring on his services as well, which would be much more affordable. Now, as far as what the asking price could be, it's difficult to say, but if they didn't want to pay a first-round pick for Murray, would they consider doing that for Kuemper? Because clearly the Coyotes are going to be looking for multiple first-round picks coming back if they trade their captain and their top netminder here. So, they're losing multiple first-rounders and second and third rounders as well. I mean, one of their first rounders is gone because they traded it, and then Taylor Hall deal, and of course they were stripped of the other one by the NHL. But Kuemper to the Oilers would be a good move, and if I'm Edmonton, I would probably consider a high pick for him, given the fact of the contract and how well he's played as of late. But again, this is a deep draft for 2020, so they do need to be cautious and careful here with how they go about this. Could they afford to have $8-9 million tied up in goaltending, especially with the the cap crunch that we're facing? And we're hearing a lot of NHL teams may not be spending to the cap like they might have before the pandemic and before the NHL was shut down and lost revenue, etc. A lot of teams might only be in that 70-75 range, so that's going to make things even tighter. But obviously the Oilers in this case, maybe they'd find other ways to cut salary. I don't know, but obviously Ken Holland would know by now. We'll at least have a good idea what his team's budget's going to be for next season. But could you see Darcy Kemper going to the Edmonton Oilers from the Coyotes? And how many picks and prospects do you think they'd have to give up to make that happen? Because apparently the talks are ongoing. They're having discussions, and it very well could end up taking place. Now, jumping over to the Oilers division and provincial rival, the Calgary Flames. We now have reports from Elliot Friedman as well, indicating that they've checked in on captain of the Coyotes, Oliver Ekman Larsson. Now, when you listen to the connection, it really shouldn't be a huge surprise. In case you're not aware, the Flames GM, Brad Treliving, used to work for a long time in the Coyotes organization as an assistant GM before he got his GM opportunity with the Calgary organization. So obviously, Ekman Larsson's a player he knows well, saw him a lot, especially in his younger years. So he's quite familiar with what he could be capable of. And clearly, the Flames have a lot of question marks on their blue line. They have a couple of key guys that are pending unrestricted free agents when it comes to TJ Brody, as well as Travis Hamonic. You get Mark Giordano's only got 1 year left. He's aging as well. So you have three of your top 4 or 5 defensemen there that are, have a lot of question marks over them for this year and next year as well. They do have a couple of, younger, bright, up-and-coming defensemen, like Anderson, for example. And then, of course, you've got Noah Hannafin. And then you have other guys in the mix there as well. But, clearly they could make some change on the blue line. Now, there's a lot of talk. They could focus more so on their forward group and that core group of forwards that they could, making a move or two to kind of shake things up, which we've heard a lot about. And Friedman does go on to mention as well that they are indeed exploring Johnny Gaudreau, but they're taking their time and they don't want to mess it up and do something stupid. They're not going to make a trade just for the sake of doing it. But they are gauging the trade market for Gaudreau, and there is a possibility that can happen. But if they do connect here with the Coyotes organization and trade for Ekman Larsson, I don't see Johnny Gaudreau going the other way. I mean, theoretically, depending on where each team was at, that could be a trade that, might actually make sense, unless the Coyotes then turn around and flip Gaudreau to another team and they got their picks and assets that they're looking for from somebody else. Maybe it turns into a three-way deal. I would not completely rule that out. The main reason they're looking to do this in the first place is to cut salary and to recoup picks. So to me, it makes sense that the Flames would be paying more so in young assets and draft picks than it would be in Johnny Gaudreau. But like I said, maybe there's a three-way deal there. That's just me speculating. I can't say for sure there's any discussions there, except for what Friedman's saying, that the Flames are seriously looking into Ekman Larsson, and there very well could be a deal there. That is a deal that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the Flames are not the only team that's apparently been checking in on him. There's, interest picking up all the time. As we get closer to free agency, I would think that that's going to pick up more and more, as well as the NHL draft. Because if the Coyotes are going to pull this off, they're likely going to want to get a 2020 first-round pick if they can. So, I would think Ekman Larsson is either going to be traded, if he is, that is, because we don't know for sure it's going to happen, that he's traded either before the draft or at the draft would be what my prediction would be in that regard. But obviously, the Flames could be a good landing spot for him. So let me know what your thoughts are, especially if you're a Flames fan. If the Flames were to trade for OEL, what kind of package would you be willing to give up to acquire the Swedish defenseman? Now, some interesting news as well on the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, we've talked a lot about the fact that Max Domi was very highly likely being traded. He wasn't going to be re-signed by Montreal as an RFA, that they're likely going to be trading him. And, there's a lot of different teams that have been linked to him. Hot topic of conversation throughout the hockey world, really, for the last number of weeks. But now we're hearing from Elliotte Friedman that Phil Danault's name is picking up more and more in the trade rumor talk, and that maybe Domi could end up staying and Danault could end up being the one to be traded, because obviously Danault made it clear that he wasn't real thrilled with being lower in the lineup. He felt he earned his opportunity to play, in the top line like he had been previously, before guys like Nick Suzuki and Kotkaniemi really started to earn more of an opportunity in the offensive roles as well. And he didn't seem to be overly thrilled with where he was at. He's got 1 year left on his contract, probably looking for some big money. So it makes sense they would at least gauge the trade value and the interest out there just to see if they wanted to consider what kind of return could they possibly be looking at. I mean, Danault is a player who's well respected around the league as a two-way center. We just talked about the Selke Trophy that was given out. Obviously, like I said, the winner was Couturier. Bergeron and O'Reilly were 2-3. Well, the next three players, 4, 5, 6, was Anthony Cirelli, Mark Stone, and Philip Danault. So he's certainly highly recognized as a player who's really strong on both ends of the ice, which to me makes sense that on most teams he would be at best a 2C and in some cases a 3C, but obviously he sees himself as being maybe a little bit more offensive, and obviously due to organizational lack of depth, he's had to play higher in the lineup than Montreal probably would have preferred, and obviously has given him a different role there. But clearly I think there would be a good market for Danault as well as Domi. I think either player would certainly attract a fair bit of interest, but obviously there's a possibility here that Domi could stay after all, because clearly Domi sounds like he wants to play center as well, and if one of those two guys is gone, well, then you can have a 1-2-3 of Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, and whichever one of those guys ends up staying. Now, obviously, Danault's contract will play a role in what kind of extension he's looking for certain teams to make the acquisition. But I would think if you look around, you could see a team like the Penguins maybe. Obviously, they're looking for a number 3 center. Now, he wouldn't be able to play as high in the lineup there as he's looking for. But to me, he's making a decent amount of money that they could work with, at least right now. You get the New York Rangers. There's a lot of talk and speculation about Ryan Strome being their number 2 center. Will the Rangers commit a big-time contract to him after putting up big numbers, playing a lot with Panarin? Or will they look to move on from Strome, and maybe Danault could be a guy that comes in to give them that two-way center, which is something that they don't exactly have as well as that they probably would like. So, I mean, you look around the NHL, there's lots of other teams as well. There's just a few examples, but right now Danault's not making a ton of money, but if he's looking for, $6-7 million on his next contract, I don't think he's going to be able to get that personally. I mean, yes, he's a great two-way center. He has been more offensive than many probably have given him credit for, but he's got a career-high 13 goals, and I just don't see teams shelling out the big money to make that happen. But there will certainly be interest, there's no doubt, and Marc Bergevin will likely have more of an option here than he may have originally thought about maybe keeping Domi and trading Danault instead. So let me know your thoughts, especially if you're a Habs fan. If you can only pick one of these players to stay, which one stays? And obviously, they're going to need new contracts. What are you willing to pay that player to be a part of your organizational future? So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Now, lastly here, I want to talk about Taylor Hall and where he could end up. And according to Elliotte Friedman, again, which is not the first time we've heard this, I've mentioned this a few times on my own opinions as well, that he's linking the Colorado Avalanche is kind of going all in this year and really going for it, trying to win, that he figures that they will try their best to sign a big-time player on a short-term, like a 1-year contract, offer a lot of money, but only for 1 year, and really make a push to go for it. And that player likely could be Taylor Hall. Now, that to me would make a lot of sense for a couple of reasons. I mean, the Avs obviously came really close to making a deep playoff run. They had a great showing in the 2020 playoffs, and you can see they're just a couple of pieces missing from making that push to be, a more legitimate Stanley Cup contender, even though I thought coming in this year they were to a degree a cup contender, but they do have a couple of missing ingredients that kind of became more apparent as the playoffs went a little bit further, and having an extra scoring punch would help, and even having more consistency in the net would be nice, even though they, for the most part, they did get that between Grubauer as well as Francouz, but over time they both got hurt. And, obviously things kind of fell apart there. Hutchison did okay. It certainly was not, I'm not putting this on goaltending by any means, but there was already a lot of talk that they might try to find a younger goalie, and they've been linked to a guy like Matt Murray as well. So the Avs could be a team kind of making substantial moves here, like more than one. They could be looking to trade for a guy like Matt Murray, as well as sign a player like Taylor Hall in free agency. I mean, they have guys like Cale Makar, Samuel Girard, Gabriel Landeskog. They're going to be needing new contracts in a not too distant future, and they're all going to be looking for pretty substantial money because they've had pretty solid years here recently, and they're going to have to pay them. So now is their time where they have a little bit of a short window of flexibility where they could add a player on a short-term expensive contract to really make that push. And even if the player doesn't stay longer term, maybe they get a Stanley Cup out of it and they don't care. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about winning, and you got to take advantage of your opportunities when they present themselves. And everything going on in Arizona, I would personally think that the odds of Taylor Hall staying with the Coyotes are pretty slim. I mean, there's even been talk that the coach, Rick Tocchet, it's hard to say how long he stays. Obviously, the team's cutting payroll. There's been a lot of talk in the NHL about coaches and different staff having their salaries cut back as well, obviously due to the lost revenue in the pandemic. And there's a lot of people out there in the NHL that are not pleased right now. So we could see substantial movement out of that organization, and very well would not be too shocking, at least in my opinion, to see Taylor Hall end up in Colorado on an expensive one-year contract. Friedman's been saying for a while, of all the players out there, he would be willing to bet on that Hall would be one of those guys that would take that short-term win-now contract and deal with the rest later, rather than locking in long-term and trying to lock up for as much money as he can. We get other players that are more concerned about term and money right now, where Hall really wants to win. He'll worry about the rest later. At least that's how things are looking. So let me know your thoughts on the possibility of Taylor Hall going to Colorado down in the comments so we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.